Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And America's favorite game show is coming back, folks. We're going to spin the wheel today. I thought this was really helpful, not just for us, but for everybody who is still kind of diving into their first group cases, hasn't started one yet, people who work nationally and have example states that they work in that could come up for a case that they have, and just for us to be able to stress test our tools, right? And do they stand up to the situations we know off the top of our head, and vice versa. So, uh, if you weren't here for the last one, what we're going to do is spin a wheel to give us a random state, and we are going to use a random number generator to give us a random group size. And from there, what we are going to do is just give you an idea of how we prepare for any given case. So we'll just run through our product buddy tool as usual. That will probably lead to larger conversation about what's new with a given product or have us dive into the pricing. If we've got a sample that's close, maybe we'll look at something with census quote on the group. So you will get an idea of randomly generated case studies, and I would love to hear any questions from you guys as we're going through the discussion. I'd love to hear if you have a specific case. We don't have to randomly generate them, though I know you love hearing the music when we spin the wheel. But in any case, if you have a specific case study that you're working on that you want us to run through, we'll do that too. So anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments before we begin, or should I just dive right into it? All right, let's do it. And I'll share sound, of course. Alrighty. So, welcome to our little game show. Our giant wheel. Wheel of Fortune? I don't know. Wheel of Case Design. North Dakota. All right. So, nothing interesting that I know off the top of my head. Mark, do you know anything about North Dakota that we should know about? I
I
see we've made a
just
participant
I
happy.
spent some time with a BJ in North Dakota yesterday. It's not these things are just fate, I guess. You're right. I don't know of a lot of nuance on the group side with North Dakota. I do know that here's a fun fact about North Dakota. In the past, it has the highest percentage of individuals that buy long-term care insurance.
Wow.
Now they only have 700,000 people in North Dakota, but out of that 700,000, they are believers in long-term care insurance. I can tell you that.
That's super interesting. Maybe not a ton of extended family, so looking to outside resources wherever they can to help with their caregiving. Oh,
Mhm.
I
A
like
lot
I
of
like that.
people in the oil, gas, that type of industries, farming. There's a lot of industries that really make sense. That long-term care insurance, has been a good fit for that industry.
That's true. Asset protection and farmers, just ask Rhonda Bills,
Mhm.
hand in hand.
Let's look at the product buddy though. Let's see if.
Well, we have to get a group size first.
Oh, sorry about
So
that. You got to do
my
the
random
wheel
my
again.
random number generator here. Can you see my
Yeah.
screen on the
Yep.
generator? Okay,
Sorry
perfect.
about that.
394. So we're considering this a large group. I set
Right.
the range here because generally for 250 we can come up with something that will, be representative of most groups, but we're going to treat this as an unusually large group. So I'm going to go to Product Buddy, and I'm going to choose the great state of North Dakota. I'm going to say we're an employer group, and we're going to go 100 plus. And you will see actually in the near future, Product Buddy is going to update a little bit just to kind of encompass more groups, plan designs, underwriting offers that we have with Buddy INS. So you will see eventually a 100 to 249 size segment and a 250 plus, just so you know what's on the horizon. But number one, this has something to do with the size of the group, but it looks like North Dakota is pretty darn free and clear when it comes to available products, at least with our core carriers. So we do have all three term options here. We have term to 100 life plus care and Chubb LBT available. We have the standards whole life. We have Trustmark ULE. We have Transamerica's UL10 available. So I am just going to first, what I like to do is just click between each carrier, and I just like to scan the case highlights. Is there a reason one carrier is ranked where it is from a plan design availability standpoint? And to me, we do have a hit on something. So the tools are actually teaching us, which is pretty interesting. The case highlights for Chubb show that we actually do not have a restoration of death benefit rider. Now, would I absolutely jettison a case out the window for a specific carrier if I don't have restoration available? Probably not, but I tend to stick with ones that have full availability, especially when we have number one, five other choices that are available here. And number two, given that Chubb has sort of revised its stance lately to go away from what they would call a standalone long-term care offering, meaning they're not really so psyched about offering just LBT without bundling any other ancillary products into the enrollment. Uh, this would, to me, be a signal to maybe steer a little bit more clear of Chubb, unless there was a specific need there, or otherwise. I think if, we use 400 for that general range, but if we're dealing with a group, an employer group of 25,000, we're going to get Chubb's attention. We may have a shot at getting an exception to offer long-term care standalone, but I think we have enough appealing options elsewhere to just look elsewhere in this case. I would still try to get a proposal, show that I did my due diligence and shop the market. But um, Mark, anything from your observations? Did you know that Chubb doesn't have restoration of death benefit in North Dakota?
I did not. I learned something on this call as well. I will take that with me for my next meetings. But I will say this. I think it's important also, we talk about any case under 500, which is going to be the case here because Jason's limiting us to 400. You're going to want employer funding. So that's always a good reminder. If you get employer funding, the carrier selection may also change a little bit. And by that, I mean, if it's all voluntary, you're going to lean much more heavily into the standards term to 100. So it's listed first, not just because of product, but because their minimum participation is three. Whereas if you do a case of close to 400 here and you'd work with a Chubb or maybe a Trustmark, they might say we need 5 or 10%, which gives you a much higher benchmark for success. And when we think criteria for success, Gretchen and I talk about this, what's your criteria for success? You really want to at least hit the minimum participation. Because if you don't, the downside is the carrier could say, we're not going to offer you guaranteed issue. And you don't want to go back, and HR definitely doesn't want to go back to all those employees that applied and say, sorry, we didn't make the cut after the fact. So you really have to have a strategy going into these groups where you know you're going to hit minimum participation. So, and for that reason alone, that has become probably my number one criteria is it likely based on the strategy? If it's all voluntary in this case that we're talking about, I would lean very heavily towards the one that has the much easier success criteria.
That's a super good point to bring into this. It sounds like a basic success metric, but understanding why it's so important is definitely important. I mean, just think about with a group this size. I mean, let's not even consider it 400. Like, let's say we're dealing with 1,000, 2,000, whatever it may be. If we're not hitting minimum participation 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the enrollment, the team that you're meeting with, likely HR, broker, maybe an executive or two, it's kind of an uncomfortable conversation, right? To say, hey, we're not even at this point. above the minimum amount of participation we need to really keep this going, right? And you have to kind of get a little bit more serious in talking about the stakes of not hitting the minimum. So now it's gone from something we were really excited to enroll in, may still be, right? Um, and, you know, optimism at the front of the enrollment, preparing for success, all the way to, well, if we can't even at least get this, then XYZ is going to happen, right? So I think that's a super important thing to bring up, and having low participation metrics just takes that headache away. I also think it may impact future enrollments too, right? So for many groups, we actually can get a couple of stabs at a GI enrollment, right? Maybe the first couple of years, we get that sort of privilege with a group that's performing well. Generally, if you're just kind of scraping the bottom and don't have a good reason to ask for another GI window or two, you're probably not going to get it from the carrier. So just a couple of extra things to consider there. Um, yeah, I would agree. Looking at a term solution, especially if all voluntary, the standards term to 100, life plus care, a solution like that is helpful because you're dealing with far more affordable rates. Voluntary is going to be out of the employee's pocket by nature. So you want something that is not just attractive from a benefits perspective, but it's got to be easy to get into the door from a premium perspective. Anyone have any thoughts, questions? Mark, anything else on this? I mean, this is a pretty straightforward case. I think we covered a lot of the considerations, but
Yeah, I'll give another just general kind of comment based on this kind of case study. You'll see on this screen, right? Um, Monthly benefit 30,477. So when I'm looking at these previews, I like having the benefit buddy chart at the top because it gives you a really quick snapshot of not just like this has inflation, this has this percentage acceleration, but what does that look like, on a real example? Because I think it really hits home the value of it. If you were to say this has 6% with, 6% acceleration with 5% compound interest, you know what your client's going to say like, what? This percent of this and this percent of that, they're going to get those two numbers even confused. If you say, hey, you're getting a $30,000 monthly cash benefit at age 70, that really is motivating, right? Like, wow, that's a really comprehensive benefit. I haven't seen that. I didn't expect that. So showing them this picture, and you can download this and obviously show it. Now look at like the next one over, which again, great products, right? Very different picture there. Now it's only on the monthly amount, so it's important to note, right? The total amount's the same between the two carriers, but the ability to have a, as Jason puts it, a bigger straw to get your benefits sooner, I think that has a huge curb appeal, cachet, and I think it presents well to the employer and the employees.
100%. Howard, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm rather new to this space. So, what is the usual percentage of employees that would be a minimum on this kind of group?
So it's really going to depend by carrier. I think the carriers that are a bit more small group minded, like the Standard, like Transamerica, they're going to give you very small nominal minimums. So the Standard's minimum is going to be 3 employees enrolled. Transamerica's minimum is going to be 5 employees enrolled. So that
Where
allows small groups to get into the picture, but it also allows even a small amount of employer funding for a small employee class to be employer funded to automatically hit that participation. So we like that a lot about those carriers specifically. For the larger group minded carriers, especially Chubb, um, generally from a voluntary perspective, they're going to look at no less than 100 employees, and generally they're looking for larger. Trustmark just
Right,
changed
sorry,
around there.
just to be clear, that's the number of eligibles, but the participation is going to be a
Right,
percentage of that, right?
right. Yeah, so for those carriers, we're looking at percentage based, 5 to 10%, depending on the group and what underwriting comes back with.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So 5 to 10%. with a group of 390 would be about 40 people.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and
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 you
and
can
here's
see how the challenges scale up when we deal with larger groups. So
yeah,
5 to 10% of 10,000, for example, now you're really having to push the pedal down on engagement and participation and just promotion of the benefit.
yeah. And I'll also point out that a lot of times these carriers, you know, if you ask for an exception to that, they may allow you to enroll it at less than that participation. It's quite common, but you don't want to have that uncertainty hanging over your head where you don't know for sure what they're going to do. So they're leaving the options open to them, and that makes everyone uncomfortable. But that's what the proposal will say, 5, 10, sometimes 15% participation minimum to issue this group. And yeah, if it's all voluntary, even though we have a lot of confidence, obviously, in our abilities, I'm sure you do when it comes to long-term care, the first time you enroll it, especially during an enrollment period, people don't always act that first time. We sometimes see the second enrollment gets more participation than the first enrollment because we've had more time to deliver the education and build that advocacy. But the carriers may not be that patient with you.
Right. Now,
100%.
is is do people normally use outside enrollment services, or how does that work? And um, is I guess employer participation in the promotion is really key as well, correct? And how
100%.
how do
And to
you
your first question, you hit on why we have jobs. Yes,
Mhm.
generally people are using, third party or partner enrollment firms and services. So that is beyond, the sales tools, beyond helping people to actually get that sale over the finish line. Our kind of primary function is as an enrollment partner. So helping to administer the enrollment platform, the application experience, but also handling a lot of the education through webinars, working with the employer to implement the schedule, the education, the promotion and marketing of the benefit, uh, and educational landing pages for employees to really figure out the ins and outs of their plan.
so the
Jason's too
third
kind to
party
say it
handle all
directly,
that,
but
or just the actual enrollments on site?
yeah, yeah. So we don't do on-site, but Jason's too nice to say it, but almost everybody in this group works with us to do the enrollment, Howard.
Oh, I see.
So
You
so
have
we're
you
we're available to help
have
you,
that
but we do
enrollment
it
with that third party.
right, right.
That
So
is us.
but we are usually doing it through like digital, right? Through Zoom. We're doing webinars, email communications. So it's great. A lot of employers have moved to a digital enrollment, even post-COVID, right? A lot of people have gotten more comfortable with that approach.
Okay, yeah, that makes it much. I was working on with Aflac and other um, you know
Hmm.
parties for not with LTC but others, and it was sometimes difficult just to get 10 minutes from an employer. It was small groups just to get
Hmm.
them assembled and get them in and enrolled, and that would be a lot of time wasted on the agent's part.
Yeah, sometimes we'll have a group and it'll have, 200 people in it, and we'll get 150 people on a webinar live. And just because it's more convenient, right, to have everybody show up that way, and that's great. Sometimes you get only a few because they don't really push it, but it really is a big part of the process too, is how do we get engagement? Maybe not for today's topic, but definitely an important consideration.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would imagine it also depends on the industry. Some people in some industries will be sort of technology nerds, and some will be technology. They just don't know anything about it.
A little bit. It's probably less about that. Honestly, it's more about whether employees are behind computers and behind their desks during the day or if they're in the field. You
I
know,
see.
yeah, because almost all of them, rely on email communications, so that's a universal. Um, but the employees getting actually attending is a different story. And so we try to make it really convenient, and that's what part of what Gretchen and her team does as well, is figure out what is the employer's channels that make the most sense. It's not cookie cutter.
Right.
who are the employees? Who's the audience, and how do we find them, right? Are they, um, natively at a desk doing a lot of work with email or anything of that nature, or are they flying planes and we literally could not reach them for a webinar during the day if we tried, right?
Right.
Um,
So I would imagine if you have something online that they can access at their leisure, then it's a 24/7 enrollment.
100%.
That is correct.
Yep, you are promoting what we do without knowing it. I like people like you.
Hmm.
Um,
Hey,
all right.
Jason,
Yes, sir.
Jason, you all mentioned something just a second ago about employer funding. Can you
Hmm.
go over that? What for groups under 100 employees, what is typically expected from an employer funding perspective? And
Yeah.
are there situations where the long-term care would be offered without employer funding on a groups under 100 employees?
So I guess I'll start by saying that for groups of that size, under 100 employees, is it technically mandatory? No, but it is more than customary, I would say. That's how I would phrase it. I think it is such a big explainer of success and also just what makes the enrollment economic for everybody to a degree. Like we've seen groups of much higher employee populations go through a full voluntary enrollment and end up with zero, one, two apps. I mean, we're talking,
Let me, I'll put it a little bit differently just to make it easier to present. What I would say to Clay is if you advise them, hey, I'm your trusted advisor and you really need to do employer funding for this to be successful, they will rarely go against what you're recommending to them. So you just have to really be firm about that because the consequences of not doing it are really bad for the client, right? To have to go back to the employees, and they get two people and you say to them, sorry, I can't get you this policy now. Nobody gets this policy, at all. They don't want to risk that. So I think it's
Well,
just really important to be really upfront about that. And we don't see it being an objection. Where it happens sometimes is when they commit to it in the beginning and then they get into a decision maker that controls the budget, like the CFO, and they really can't do it for some reason from a financial perspective. They didn't know that. And they said, well, can we still do it? We still want to salvage this. Maybe we can get it the second year. Sometimes we'll make exceptions for that because we know they're really going to advocate for this, right? They're
okay.
really going to try hard, without that. But it's really the exception, and you have to be careful about just granting those exceptions. The carriers might, but you can't afford to have the client, have that embarrassment face them.
Okay, understood. Next question though is what is the typical employer funded amount? Is it a flat amount, percentage? What do you typically see from that perspective?
yeah, let me pull
Mhm.
something up that will likely help with
Yeah.
that.
And the easy way, again, Clay, to think of it is you generally are going to do a basic plan, so like a starter plan, a small plan for everybody, or you're going to do a
Okay.
carve out where they're usually going to choose something between half and the full guaranteed issue amount that you can get, which we know up front what that is. And so when
Okay.
Jason quotes it here, those are the two options that you should show to them, the most common options.
So here's an under 100 employee sample group here. I've got
Okay.
all their dates of birth in. We're converting the date of birth to age automatically in the census quote. And let's just say we're going to do the standard term. We'll do the 5% on the monthly benefit for kicks. And we'll just stick with, you know, we'll stick with three cells here, but I want to do 10,000. I want to see 25,000 on the death benefit, and I want to see 50,000. One thing to note is that you do not have to fund every single employee. If you have a class that you can use to discriminate, whether it be by job title, by tenure. We've had a group recently that said if you're with the company over 2 years, we're going to fund your plan, right? You can discriminate with this benefit. So just to take you through this, the census quote helps with a couple of things, not only to get those costs, but it'll actually show you who is aged out of this plan. right? So if we don't have anything included here, NA means this person could purchase a whole life insurance plan, but they have aged out of the long-term care rider. If you don't see anything, they have aged out of the plan completely. So that's how to tell the difference there. But what you see up here is this is the total amount of monthly premium to purchase a plan for all employees at each given benefit level. So you can see, even if they did a small 10,000 plan for all of their employees, 613 bucks a month. And let's say we have a class of employees. Let's say we have, say, 6 employees in an executive class. We can check the box for those 6 employees. And what it will show you here is the premium to fund each benefit level for those 6 employees. So you can see, even if our minimum participation is 3 for the standard, we can double the minimum participation for $49 a month out of the employer's pocket. Okay, so I think for many employers, it's tough to make a decision if you can't see how affordable it is.
Yeah, I think the also thing you see here, Clay, is it's not about the cost. They're not afraid to spend $50 a month for the whole group, right? They just want it to be easy and they want to be able to explain it to people. So giving them a strategy that's easy and easy to communicate, that's the goal, which is why you don't want the employer funding strategy to be too complicated.
Okay.
Some employers are going to say, we don't like to discriminate with our benefits. We want to provide it to everybody because they just want to offer it fairly to everybody. And they have that culture. And that's really the question that you should have for them is what is your culture and how do you want to offer benefits? What are you trying to accomplish, with your plan? So if you know what they're trying to accomplish, and you start to hear about what they're doing for other benefits, you'll start to really understand how to position the employer funding. I like that average. Do you see the average at the bottom where it says $8, $20, $41? That's the per policy average. So, if they tell you I have 10 people, you can multiply that number by 10, and that's going to tell you approximately what the cost would be, even without, going back to the spreadsheet here. So, and if it's like $8 per employee per month, that's usually shockingly inexpensive for long-term care, right?
So one thing to note there, Mark, is that when you have a carve-out group selected, that's
Hmm.
just for the selected.
Okay.
So just to
Either way, I
note,
know it's like
if
$13,
you
I
take it
saw.
out, yeah, it exactly 13 bucks.
$13. But like my point is it doesn't matter too much. It's a small-ish amount. And honestly, for us, the real thing is that meaningful coverage, right? That's what we're trying to get at. The reason Jason shows the 10,000 is even though it's a $600 monthly benefit, that grows 5% compounded. So it grows into something more meaningful. But also, the employer funding is a lever to get people to pay attention to the plan. The main
Sure.
reason we do it is because the voluntary participation is significantly higher when you do employer funding. And
Sure.
that's what's going to generate success for the group and the goodwill with the group. People are going to
Right.
show up to the education, they're going to value what they're getting, they're going to participate more. And that's what everyone wants to see. The employer is actually the number one person that wants to see people participating in the plan. Obviously, we do, and the carrier does too, but honestly, it's for the client. They want to see they're not wasting their time doing this.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Great questions. And there's lots of flexibilities, lots of different ways you can administer the employer funding. So not just like splitting up into different classes, but we've also seen enrollments where it has been, I would say, almost a hybrid between voluntary and employer funded. We've seen groups that we've enrolled that have said, we will subsidize 30% of whatever you purchase, but you have to purchase something to be able to get a subsidy, right? I thought that was an interesting case. I would say it's a little less effective than uh, actually outright purchasing a benefit amount for a class of employees. But I thought that was pretty interesting, almost like a sort of almost getting at a match, kind of. So there's a lot
It,
of creative ways you
it,
can do it, but
yeah, it does come down to exactly what the employer is trying to accomplish. So I had an
right.
employer recently that said, well, I don't want to pay for everybody because there's going to be a lot of people that leave and don't keep it, which is true. I say, well, if you want to maximize the people getting the most value out of it, then make them enroll in it voluntarily and tell them you'll reimburse them 100%. If they don't enroll when they're getting 100% of it paid for back to them, they probably didn't care about it enough to enroll in it. So you're only going to be paying for people that actually spent the time to go through the 5-minute enrollment process. So there's ways to do it where you can kind of accommodate what their goal is or what their objection is with it. And like Jason said, it's very flexible, but don't make it too complicated. And that's where, again, we'll come in and you'll probably bring in Sandy on our team to help you because whatever your strategy is, we want to make sure we can like deliver for you on the enrollment side because that's our job is to give you a seamless experience there.
Let them add complications before you do, I guess,
Right.
depending on what they want.
Yes.
Howard, do
Good
you have
rule of
another
thumb in
question?
insurance
Oh,
sales in general.
yeah.
Howard, I see you have your hand raised there.
Yes. My question is, um, you originally selected this as an employer group. Would be if it was a non-employer group about would the carriers have changed? Would the prices have changed? What would have changed based on just that one example?
I can do that for you. So generally, the carrier roster is going to shrink significantly. What we generally see is that the two carriers that are most receptive to associations, and Transamerica is receptive as well, but you're not going to get the same enrollment terms as you would with the carriers on this list, are the Standard and Chubb. Chubb, you have that again, you have that sort of stance they're beginning to take of needing to bundle several voluntary benefits products to receive a long-term care offer. And I would say Chubb in general is probably less warm to associations than the Standard. But there are options available, just fewer. Trustmark, um, not really ready to look at associations, but they may look at things like unions, for example. But non-employer can really encompass a lot of different groups.
Yeah, let me also add some context here because it's been a while. We haven't had an association session in a while, and there's a lot
Mhm.
that we've experienced and learned about it. The group carriers in general are only going to want to work with associations or non-employer groups, which is a little bit different, that have individual employees as members. So not companies, and they have to be very large, like at least 2,000 in one particular state. So there's a lot of criterias you're going to have to check the box on.
Also, they want to know that the affinity of the association is generally based on a trade or an occupation, and that those members are actively at work. So if
Yep.
you've got an association of 2,000 people in a state who are part of an association of people who like to ride bikes, probably not going to fly compared to an association of doctors, dentists, lawyers, any sort of given occupation.
I
Mhm.
see. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot
What
of
about
different nuance
money
comp. Now,
association?
what we are doing, and this is a good topic, Howard, that you brought up, is we will be adding a carrier list to the portal. And as
Okay.
part of that launch, we're actually adding a new section for individual products that are designed for multi-life cases. Those are a better fit for a lot of the associations that we're seeing because they don't have to do the same filings per state that the group products have to do.
I see.
Okay?
What about an alumni association where people are all across the country? And the only
Much more difficult to do a group product. There are always exceptions. So we're working with one big partner that has a trust that allows them to all get coverage through one state.
uh,
But, that's a very exceptional situation. In most situations, you have to have the people that you're offering it to be geographically concentrated. And in alumni associations, they're not. So
okay.
you're probably not going to be able to do that very successfully. And that just has to do with the insurance company having to file it in every state for you.
Oh,
They're
I
not
see.
going to
I
do
see.
that without
I
a
see.
lot of volume.
I see. Okay.
Awesome questions, by the way. This is great. We're covering a lot of the ins and outs and ranges of what we do. Let's get another spin. So I'm going to eliminate North Dakota. We love you, but we don't want to visit you twice. Rhode Island. Okay,
Ah,
interesting.
of course.
Uh, Up in the Northeast. And you know anything about insurance, if you've ever lived in the Northeast, the rules can be kind of touchy. So I'm interested in this one.
And
And get a new number here, 115. So we're not necessarily talking small group, but we are definitely in what we would call that mid-range size group, like the very beginning of mid-size group. Um, Rhode Island. What do we got in Rhode Island? Let's see. 100 plus is in play here. Um, so
You're still on non-employer, just so you know.
thank you.
Mhm.
So pretty
We
wide.
have a question. Somebody wants to know what the spin the wheel app, where he can find that.
So this is just for 50 states. I literally quick Google search, turn this up. Wordwall.net is where I found this. But if you literally Google uh, like spinning wheel 50 states, something of that nature, you will end up here. You'll find it.
We could
Um,
do that with insurance products maybe too.
that's
Which
true.
product do we
No,
want for you with the spin the wheel?
no, I'm gonna use this for my one-to-ones with Mark. What should we talk
What?
about today?
Yeah, there you go. Music and all. Um, so Rhode Island, pretty wide availability again, and group size has something to do with this, as it always does. And we're seeing a little bit different order of the carriers this time. If you remember when we were in North Dakota, we saw Chubb at the bottom. Now they're more in the middle of the pack of the ranking. We see Transamerica at the bottom this time. So again, I just come through and I scan my case highlights for each and every carrier,
Rhode
and I
Island's actually pretty
see
good.
I see pretty clean. Rhode Island, stand up. You got some good group long-term care coverage. I'm seeing full benefit availability for um, every carrier, every product in Rhode Island. So that strikes me, honestly. So for those of you who do relatively local work in Massachusetts or any of those states in the Northeast that may be close to or bordering Rhode Island, maybe take a trip over the border and see if there's some groups you can help. Massachusetts tends to be pretty challenged. They were actually one of our selections on the spin the wheel game the last time we played, but getting better. But Rhode Island is looking really, really good. So again, I think a lot of the same principles are going to apply to the discussion here, um, because we have so much availability. And I think it's maybe worth talking about this exact group size, because we're saying under 100, you're generally going to want to have some employer funding for every case. I think that's going to apply to under 500, under 1,000. I think groups that are kind of in that range are all sorts of candidates for employer funding. Now, when you get into higher employee counts, maybe the ability to fund a plan for everyone is a bit less feasible, right? So maybe you get yourself into more of a carve out oriented discussion. And again, I think Mark makes a great point to make sure you ask, like, how are you administering your or offering your benefits culturally? Are you nobody left behind? Or do you have, executive C-suite level employer funded benefits where rank and file employees may not? And if they are comfortable with that, let's say they have an employer-funded DI plan for a law firm, right? So the practicing attorneys and partners are essentially getting that employer-funded benefit, but office staff, paralegals, junior attorneys are generally looking at voluntary for a lot of the benefits we put in place. That's a great candidate. So we've seen law firms, in this range of eligible employees, exploring strategies just like this. So I think it's just about finding the right match there. We have made voluntary enrollments work for this size, just over 100. But our best cases in this range have been with some sort of employer-funded benefit and, voluntary for the rest of the employees. And when I say employer funding for executives, you don't have to fund the maximum guaranteed issue amount for those executives. You can offer a base plan and allow for buy up from there. That's part of what makes this flexible is employer funding doesn't have to mean you're purchasing the Cadillac for any given employee. They have room to buy up on a voluntary basis, but you're getting them started with a nice chunk of benefit. That's one of the things we didn't talk about when we were going through employer funded options, right? So the ability to buy up is powerful because it kind of takes the onus off of the employer to fund the entire shebang for any given employee. So a couple of things I thought were important there. Mark, I know we've worked on a bunch of cases that are like just over 100, and I know participation rules and just all sorts of mechanics have changed since we first started in the group market. But what are your thoughts on cases of this size?
One thing that comes to mind is the nice thing about the standard as well is we have this really rich preferred underwriting offer now,
Yep.
where if you do even down to 3 employees, you can get 100,000, which is 100,000 of life, which is 200,000 of long-term care and 6,000 a month. With that 5% growth, that brings it to like 30,000, as you see here. But when you get to cases like 100 plus, if you're getting employer funding, I've seen a lot of cases where we're getting higher than that.
Hmm.
And I think it's underwriting discretion, based on industry and other factors, gender mix. So don't take this as the gospel. We try to give you, kind of a general idea of where we've seen proposals. But I would say this one you see here on the screen, that's probably a 250 plus
Right.
group. It says 100 plus, but we don't have a category for
That's
250.
where our update will actually change things. You'll start to see 100,000 for
Right.
100 to 249.
But it doesn't mean that's what you're only going to get. If you're getting employer funding, you can still do the RFP and try to get more. The carrier will give you that proactively. So you're presenting 100,000, the carrier gives you 150,000. Great news. I can come back to you with a better offer than what we thought. So that's really how to use these tools as well, right? Is to use the one pager to present a general idea, and then hopefully based on that, the employer is more motivated to then, kick in the funding and that type of thing. But that's where
One
group size
thing,
matters.
yeah, one thing that I know carriers love and where they're more inclined to give you a better offer is when you go in requesting the proposal with a plan for employer funding in place. Can't tell you how much they love that because it's a predictable revenue on the carrier side. So they are in a position where they know what the floor is economically for this enrollment because they have your plan in hand. So they're going to have a better understanding of what concessions they can give. And that's not always just for guaranteed issue amounts, right? Carriers like Chubb, for example, they actually go off of rate classes. So I believe they have, 1 to 5 for their rate classes, with 5 being generally least favorable. We're always showing class 5 rates, but employer funding can actually get you maybe from normally a class 5 based on underwriting to class 3 rates. So there's a lot to consider there, but I know if you come in with an employer-funded plan strapped and ready to go, um, at the time of requesting the proposal, higher likelihood you're going to get a better offer. And if the group's undecided, you can still go get that proposal and come back later. I just think the carrier may be less likely to adjust, but always ask, can you go to bat for this case? I think if you're able to give them the reasons why, your wholesaler will likely go back to underwriting and put their pom-poms on and do their best to try to get you a better offer. I know we're getting a bit short on time. Should we spin another one just to see? If it doesn't come out as much, we'll just kind of leave it because we don't want to cover the whole country and the whole size spectrum. But
You have to spin it now because
all right,
teased us.
I mean, only 2 spins. I can't imagine. Massachusetts, we got to repeat. So we'll just leave it. But I will show you. Rhode Island, we had everything available. Massachusetts, we kind of run into a case of less options. And for those of you who weren't on the first call, this will be a good exercise because I'm working my way through the case highlights and I see extension of benefits is not available for Trustmark ULE. Extension and restoration not available for the standard, right? Extension and restoration not available for Transamerica. So we can run into some states that are really tough. And thankfully, with the advent of Life Plus Care, with the advent of their new employer-funded rules, small groups in Massachusetts have something that's going to offer value for their long-term care. It's going to offer those all-important riders that we look for. So this is why we keep our fingers on the pulse of the market, because you never know when something's going to pop up like this and somebody who's been waiting to work with groups until they get something that's even more valuable to be able to offer comes along. Howard, you got your hand raised. Question?
Yeah, well, I know what restoration of death benefit is. That's where, after a certain period of time of a long-term care, they allow you to restore the death benefit. But what is extension of benefits?
The extension of benefit essentially doubles the amount of available long-term care. So if we are, say, this isn't the easiest example here because Trustmark works a little bit different mechanically, but I'll give you an example of we have 100,000 of death benefit with a carrier, and we have 100% death benefit restoration. So normally with these hybrid plans, if we accelerate that death benefit for long-term care and use it in full, so 100,000 death benefit all used for long-term care. Normally you would expect that death benefit to be kaput, nothing left, right? Because we've used it all early. The restoration of the death benefit, once that death benefit is accelerated, actually restores the death benefit up to whatever percentage the carrier allows. So several actually offer 100% death benefit restoration, which says whether or not I use any long-term care, I'm leaving behind 100% of the death benefit that I initially purchased. So it's a nice value preservation piece. I think if we're between, if a carrier came to me and said, we can only have a choice of one of them, extension or restoration, which is actually the case with the standard term in Florida is like that. I'm choosing extension because we are selling this for the purpose of long-term care value. So if I can double the amount of available long-term care, I get my rock solid life insurance that's not going to potentially go to long-term care. I get that somewhere else. I get that with a different product, and I worry about the long-term care value in this case.
Right. Because the long-term care benefit is the thing that life insurance won't cover otherwise. But you can get a life insurance guaranteed issue policy just about anywhere.
Yeah, most places will have a group term life plan, like a group term 10 or 20, something of that nature, where it's designed for the specific reason of having a death benefit when you need it most. And they think about their hybrid long-term care policy as long-term care, and they think of the death benefit as the way the long-term care benefits are delivered, but also if I don't need long-term care, it's a nice hedge, right? If I pass away without needing any long-term care, I get a death benefit. So it's value preservation, but it's also just the way the long-term care benefit is delivered.
Yeah, and age is that 80?
So it's going to vary a little bit by carrier. So Trustmark, their Life Plus Care is 18 to 75. Their Universal Life is 18 to 70. For the standards products, it's 18 to 70, but you can purchase the life up to age 80 with no long-term care.
I see. Okay.
Chubb is generally age 19 to 80, but in that age range of 71 to 80, the benefit is normally capped at a smaller amount. And generally over 70, carriers are saying simplified issue underwriting no matter what, as opposed to guaranteed issue. So there are some, rules to it once you're over 70, but most carriers are offering up to 70 at least.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Jason, I think we might
Jason?
have a question from Kai. So he wrote something in the chat. Can Gail, sorry to cut you off.
No,
Kai,
it's
did you
okay.
have something you wanted to ask?
Who, me?
Oh,
Now?
Kai.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
sorry.
Mark, I've been part of the Buddy INS community for quite some time. I did a 30-day free trial.
Mm-hmm.
You guys still recognize my login on your site, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not really specializing in long-term care, even though I have my certification in long-term care. It's
Mm-hmm.
a specialty that I believe is important to be able to talk to people about, but I don't want to necessarily be the expert, which is where I'd love to be able to collaborate with either Buddy INS or with advisors who are living and breathing in this space every day. What's the
Mm-hmm.
best way for me to do that?
Yeah, we can kind of talk to you a little bit more detail, but on our website, there's a referral form just on our buddyins.com website.
Well,
So yeah,
even
like
if you are in the buddy system, there's a couple of different ways to do that
okay.
as well. So if it's an individual, generally refer client is the way to go about that. So you make sure you're set to individual, refer client, and this will take you to a form to fill out. And this will actually pair you up with a specialist for joint work. And that joint work can be whatever capacity you want it to be. If you want to really put your feet up and let the specialist handle things and say, hey, just keep me in the loop, or let me know if you need anything from me, if you need me to kind of bring the client back to the table or what have you, or if you want to kind of shadow this specialist and be involved in the calls and learn from the best, you're free to do that as well. But that's how you get it started on the individual side. On the group side, it's similar, but the quote request form is really how we get your case memorialized in our system and triggered, get one of us triggered to reach out to you to get some information from you on the case, to begin working with you on that case. And again, we can be highly involved. You can pull us into those conversations with the group. We can help you with the formal proposal process. There's a lot that we can help with there. We just generally will say your best role to play in those scenarios are kind of the account manager, helping with the communication side with the group, helping to get them to the table. But beyond that, there's a lot we can help with on the group side.
Great. So I can be more of a shepherd and be as involved as I feel I need to be or want to be, or as it makes sense to be.
We love shepherds a lot. They help us to be that much more effective in what we do to help by not having to, necessarily worry about chasing after people, and instead, the shepherd is the one with the warm relationship that can bring them back. And I know shepherd can be zookeeper depending on the client, but in general, we love folks who can kind of help bring everybody together. I think that's the highest value thing you can have for us as a referral partner, is that strong communication and just a glue person.
Now, when
Great,
that
thank you.
happens, is that a
I'll bring the
commission
shepherd's
split?
hook too, if that helps.
Good deal.
Sorry to interrupt. Now, when that happens, is it a commission split?
Yes, correct. And on the group side, it's generally dependent on how much of our services that you're using for the enrollment. So both sides generally have kind of a self-service versus full service sort of scenario. So if you want us to handle things like educational webinars, if you want us to put together, one or two long-term care specialist consultants for employees, a lot of those extra services, full implementation with the carrier and the employer, that is generally more the full service route. Most people will do that for their first case. But as people get more comfortable and have need really just for maybe an enrollment landing page, pre-packaged and non-customized marketing, and use of our enrollment platform, that's a bit more self-service. That's a bit more, self-sustainable. If you feel you have a way to sustainably manage a lot of the process on your own.
Thank you.
Gail, I know you had a question.
I know we're short on time, so I'll just pose the questions and we can always talk about them maybe at another session. First off, when I've done group enrollments, it's before we really had mass marketing for hybrids. So what do you do if you get an objection from the decision maker that, well, we already offer life insurance to our employees, a basic, 100,000 death benefit. So we don't want to do that again vis-a-vis the long-term care policy, especially if we're talking to them about contributing to a base plan. So, have you come across this or any?
Yeah. And yeah, that's our most common question, Gail. And
Every
you answered the
webinar.
same way you answered on the individual side. This isn't life insurance. This is long-term care. The life insurance is just an extra value.
Have you seen much movement in comparing still a standalone plan with, say, a 5% discount, employee discount, but it would be fully underwritten versus the hybrid with the simplified issue and the life insurance. That's my concern on a couple groups that I have.
99.9% of people want the guaranteed issue.
So
Not
that
a
The
really
discount.
seems
process
to
is
be
just that much more
the silver
simple.
bullet is the guaranteed issue.
Yeah.
It's just as much about process as it is about product. So if you've got relatively comparable products, but one is going to offer a much simpler, much more inclusive
And the underwriting
process.
is so key. And my last one, we don't have to answer it today, but how are you addressing the spouses and partners in this? I've run into that, and that used to be when we did have guaranteed or simplified issue that if a spouse wanted to be part of this, he or she would, they, I want to use my pronouns correctly, would have to say, yeah, I'm working 30 hours a week as well. Some sort of
Yep.
basic underwriting for the spouse in order to get that underwriting break.
I'm going to give you the lightning round answer because there is a lot of nuance here, but on the best
Always.
side, on the most inclusive side for carriers, there's guaranteed issue available for spouses and differing amounts, kind of like you hinted to, for actively at work spouse versus non-working spouse. I would say at the least favorable side, there are amounts available for spouses on a simplified issue basis.
Okay.
And even those carriers that offer GI may
Uh-huh.
offer higher amounts SI. So
Okay.
it's pretty inclusive of spouses. Your mileage may vary depending on the group that you're working with and the
Of
carrier.
course. Okay, thanks. That's great.
Yeah, awesome questions, guys. There were so many good questions. I think we like encompassed most of uh the common questions about just the process, the sale, the enrollment. So this was very good. Thank you for participating. We'll continue to bring this game into it. I'll figure out ways to put a different spin on it as we continue to work it in, no pun intended. But we will still be spinning, that's for sure. So appreciate you guys. We'll be here this time next week. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to let us know how we can help you. But be well. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.